It is No Pucks Given here on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. I am Dan Kingerski. This is episode 17, I think. It's been a week or so since we've had a chance to do an actual, genuine, dedicated podcast, and I'm happy to do this. We are recording Tuesday evening, February 18th. So we have a couple of days before the Team Canada USA slobber knocker on Thursday night. And I know that's dominating the hockey talk. I will leave you to all of that because I don't know any more than you do about any of the injuries to the Kachucks or the Quinn Hughes situation. Certainly Canada is banged up as well. I do wonder if there's a couple of GMs going, oh, this was a bad idea. I mean, the game is making a ton of money. Fans are level 10 excited. The players are into it. But this may genuinely affect the Stanley Cup playoffs. To that end, on the No Pucks Given, we are going to talk about Sidney Crosby, the obvious arm injury that is getting no better. Some silly trade talk coming out of Montreal based on that incredible ovation that Sid got. In fact, some former teammates sort of jumped in on the cavalcade or the rumor mill. And by former teammates, I don't mean Paul Bissonnette and Ryan Whitney at Spit and Chicklets. No. There are some former teammates who do a radio show in Montreal who got into the act, and we'll talk a bit about both their trade talk and that whole scene and situation with Sidney Crosby, because I think this is going to be like an onion where you start peeling it. There's going to be some tears. It's going to stink a little. There's going to be some people who are upset. But first, I want to really get into the Penguins prospects and what you can expect over the next, let's call it the next 12 months. Because there is going to be a wave of young players hitting the Penguins lineup. There just isn't any question. You're seeing the first trickle now. You see Owen Pickering get 25 games, and I was teasing him that he plays one more game, he can't be Rookie of the Year next year. He had a little laugh at that. We'll get into Owen Pickering. And Emil Bemstrom, back with the team, recalled on Tuesday, full participant in practice. I don't think they recalled Bemstrom just to look pretty for 4 days and then not play in the games this weekend. That would be kind of silly because they really have something special going on in Wilkes-Barre. I will attest to it firsthand. Hopefully you had a chance to read the PHN Plus stories Saturday and Sunday. In fact, I was talking with a few people again on Tuesday, and one person said, I wish I could tell you who it was. I mean, it's nothing dramatic, but that team is so good. They've got everything. And they really do. They're going to have goaltending that is above board in the AHL, no matter who is down there, whether it's Blomqvist, Jari, Larson, Murashov. Goaltending's taken care of. They've got some offensive defensemen, Philip Kral, Mac Hollowell. They've got the defensive side covered in the playoffs. I assume Owen Pickering will be back in the regular season, but they're going to have Pickering and Jack St. Ivany guarding the blue line, and some solid AHL guys down there, Dan Renouf and Scooter Brickley, so on and so forth. They've got a couple of really good lines, although taking Bemstrom out. They've got the Tristan Broz and Rutger McGroarty and Ville Koivunen. You go down the list, and they can score on all four lines. So the point was that team is really good. There is going to be I think, an effort to keep them together, whether that be in Wilkes-Barre or in Pittsburgh. I think you're not going to see like one at a time come up. I think you might see two or three all come up so that they are supported and that they are more comfortable. Also, organizations love when the prospects get a playoff run. Love that because they get a chance to see what the prospect performs like under real pressure of the playoffs and chasing a goal. They really get a chance. I didn't realize this, but like Wilkes-Barre in their division, they're going to play Lehigh Valley and Hershey 12 times this year, 12 times each. That's a little bit of insanity, if you ask me. I mean, Wilkes-Barre isn't that far from Hartford, not that far from Massachusetts. It's like a 5-hour jaunt. I know Hershey is only a 2-hour ride, and Lehigh Valley, which is Allentown, is less than an hour if you don't catch traffic or, you go straight through without construction, et cetera. You can fly right into Allentown. I understand those things are easy. You can, you don't need the hotels. You can go in and out on a game day or especially a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. I get all of that, but 12 times because the games against Hershey last week were insanity. I mean, just slobber knockers. Vasily Ponomarev taking 10-minute misconduct penalties. And I don't mean, let me rephrase that, not 10-minute misconduct penalties, game misconduct penalties, with some incredibly stupid penalties settling scores, like cannonballing himself into a scrum and just plastering a guy from behind against the glass. So hard, in fact, they needed to fix the glass. That was last Tuesday, 1 week from when I'm talking. Then on Saturday against Hershey again, there's a net scrum and the whistles blow and the referees are sorting everybody out and it's dying down. Everyone's starting to skate their own direction. And Ponomarev just turns and decks Pierrick Dubé, who's actually had a couple of games with the Flyers this season. But he's one of those agitating kind of tough guys. And Ponomarev just drops him with a sucker punch. Dubé falls to the ice. That was really, I have not been bullish on Ponomarev's NHL future to begin with. In full disclosure, because let's kind of go down the list now. I'm going to start with Ponomarev, and then, we will get to Rutger McGroarty, Tristan Broz, Owen Pickering. I've got some inside nuggets you're not going to like hearing regarding Owen Pickering. No fault of his. He's playing fine, But there's some story surrounding the Penguins and Pickering that I think you might get your dander up a little bit. And I'm going to try to be very cautious in how I phrase it. But with Ponomarev, he was to be the first of the prospect train to arrive in Pittsburgh. He was supposed to play last year, supposed to, go down to Wilkes-Barre for a couple of weeks, get his feet wet, get the system, and then come to the NHL. Well, he suffers a high ankle sprain 4 games into his Penguins career, never gets to the NHL. This year he's had 6 games. 4 games. There's only 3. I tried to do this off the top of my head sometimes. Regardless, he's had a few opportunities at the NHL level this season. He's played 4 games. And no points, a couple of penalty minutes, a -1. But we really didn't grade him well against Philadelphia before the break. Kind of lateral passes at the blue line to no one, blind backhand passes that fed Philadelphia's transition against them. It wasn't a good game. It was really actually kind of a pretty bad game. He didn't keep it simple and just do the things that he can do. And I haven't seen him do those things. So I've kind of been very tepidly grading him to this point. And then when I saw the game misconduct penalties, 2 out of 3 games, by the way, I mean, if you've been on Pittsburgh hockey now, you obviously have seen my coverage spending a night in Hershey, stupidly driving back to Pittsburgh because I was afraid of the weather and getting stuck in Wilkes-Barre, only to realize that I had a 12-hour window to get to Wilkes-Barre. So I get home in Pittsburgh Wednesday morning, and I literally sleep in my recliner and drive back to Wilkes-Barre. So instead of 2 hours of driving, I did 9 hours because I'm an idiot. I did have a pretty good time in Wilkes-Barre. It's a cute little town. I mean, it's not pretty. The people are wonderfully nice. You don't go there for the food. There was an IHOP connected to my hotel, like shared a parking lot, and I couldn't even get in the IHOP. It was full, like 20. Well, they weren't open 24/7, but I'm getting off track. I enjoyed Wilkes-Barre very much. I stayed at the Days Inn, kind of just on the other side of the mall, if you've ever been up there. You really can't walk to the arena unless you stay at the Motel 6 or the Home 2 Suites. And so that I don't get sued, let's just say I don't want to stay there anymore. For obvious inferenced reasons. So I haven't graded Panamara very well. There is going to be a reckoning between the Penguins organization and Ponomarev. In fact, I might even ask Jason Spezza. I get a chance to talk to him on Wednesday after the Penguins practice. In fact, we all do. I mean, it's going to be like a media scrum. I might ask him, do you need to screw on Ponomarev's head a little tighter? The Penguins would love a guy with some grit and speed in the bottom of their lineup. The Penguins would absolutely hate a loose cannon. They don't want a Bobby Farnham, Daniel Carcillo type that's going to go off half-cocked at any point in the game. Because both times Ponomarev took those game misconduct penalties, he negated a Penguins power play. The power play that he negated on Saturday was later in the third period, 7 minutes to go. Think about that. You're getting a 2-minute power play with 7 to go. You've got a chance to ice the game because the Penguins led by 1. Instead, now the Penguins are killing off 3 minutes of a major penalty. They're playing 4-on-4. Or was it 5 on? I don't recall if it was 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 for the first couple of minutes. And then Hershey gets a full 3-minute power play. Well, obviously that emboldens them. That creates momentum. That tires out Wilkes-Barre, who's killing a penalty for 3 minutes with the same, handful of forwards, minus Ponomarev, who would have been on the ice. I will say there was a bit of a mixed reaction. Some of the guys thought it was pretty funny. They enjoyed watching Ponomarev deck Dubé. Some other guys were like, oh, that was so stupid. Direct quote. So I suppose it depended on what you had to do to clean up that mess. Having said all of that, Ponomarev probably will get another NHL shot, but he will get a talking to. Can you imagine him doing that against the Philadelphia Flyers and costing the Penguins 2 points? Or I suppose 1 point because he takes a late third period penalty and it changes the game and the other team ties it up in the final minute after you're exhausted. PK and then 6-on-5 and then lose in overtime. Can you imagine Mike Sullivan's reaction to a rookie doing that? Yeah, I wouldn't want to be between those two. That's for sure. So Ponomarev, final analysis, he's got all of the tools. I wonder if he has yet put them all in the toolbox to use. He hasn't been as impactful as I think he can be. In fact, he hasn't been impactful at all at the NHL level. Zero. A 0 impact score. He's got a decent statistical line with Wilkes-Barre. I think it was like 29 points in his first 34 games. I didn't check what he did on Sunday. So he's clearly making an impact there as a top liner in Wilkes-Barre. But the handful of games I've seen this year and really put my eyes on him, it's been other guys doing the dirty work. All right, let's get to Rutger McGroarty here. I am a little bit excited to talk about McGroarty, in large part because I think he's going to make the NHL in short order. He's also going to make an impact, but not necessarily in all of the ways expected. I think he really could be a great third-line player. You're like, what? You don't trade Braden Yeager for a great third line? Hear me out on this. And I'm not saying Rutger McGroarty won't be a 20-goal scorer. He very well might be a second-line kind of guy. Heck, he with the right center, he could be a first-line guy. He's not quite as elusive, shifty as Jake Gensel. So he can't do some of the things that Gensel would do. But he can do a lot of the things Gensel could do. He thinks the game in that sort of next level playing chess sort of way. But what stands out about McGroarty to the organization, to coaches, and even teammates, the word that was used when I brought his name up was details. His game has all of those details. He's on the ice in the final minute. He's killing penalties. He's playing in hard defensive situations, which Wilkes-Barre people fully admit sort of suppresses his offensive total. Because he's playing in the defensive zone, you got to go 200 feet to score. So it's dragging down his statistics. So when you look at, let's say, what do you look at? Elite Prospects, Hockey DB, Wilkes-Barre's webpage, whatever you do to keep tabs on the prospects, you're looking at a guy who, I did the math, in the last his last 29 games had like 20 points. Again, I didn't check Sunday. Which is solid, that's what, a 0.6 points per game. That's a 45-point output. Hot streak here or there, somewhere between 40 and 50 points a season. That's not a bad career. Especially when you're pretty good on defense, which McGroarty is. You don't notice him. He's not Noel Acciari making the big hits along the wall. He's not out at the point blocking shots and taking pain. He's instead reading the passing lane and taking away that pass, intercepting it, deflecting it. He's drifting towards the net when he sees another lane open up and can't be burned. He's doing those really smart little things. I wonder if his game's going to be better at the NHL level than it is at the AHL level because he's playing with other smarter players. He's also hit the gym. 8 pounds of muscle since the beginning of the year. Which is kind of funny because I've gained at least 8 pounds of fat since the beginning of the year. But, he's getting a bit of a different physique. You can see it in his shoulders. And he's tossed a couple of big hits, and he was kind of proud of that. Yeah, I got a chance to talk to the guys, and just between you and me, it's funny or a little bit freaky or whatever adjective, I'm not sure. It's a little bit unnerving, I think, to me, that the young guys all know who I am. They know me by name at this point. And they know a little bit about me, and they read a lot of the stuff I write, and they're following along. And so when, Dan is in Wilkes-Barre, it's like, oh, yeah, I'll talk to Dan. Hop off the exercise bike and come and talk to me. And then like, hey, you want me to go get him in the locker room for you? I'm like, I can't ask a player to go into the locker room to get another player to bring him out and talk to me. You don't actually go into the locker room at the AHL level. After the game, we kind of have these conversations in the hallway. one-on-one or, a couple on one. And that was it. That kind of blew my mind. That guys are like, oh, cool, I get to talk to Dan. Like the Pittsburgh audience is going to hear about me and that sort of thing. I think McGroarty is going to surprise a lot of people with a much different game than you're expecting. Very complete. When he gets to the NHL, he literally, Mike Sullivan will be able to put him on the fourth line or the top line and probably have quite a bit of trust after the first few games, after the adrenaline dies down, after he stops trying to do too much and he settles in. McGroarty is going to be just fine at the NHL level. If the situation were a little bit different, the Penguins were depleted, he'd be up here. If the Penguins weren't chasing a playoff spot, I think he'd be up here. But again, just those two factors, chasing a playoff spot and keeping Wilkes-Barre together, because they have a genuine chance to win the Calder Cup. Genuine. I mean, there aren't many better teams in the AHL. They've got a real chance for a long playoff run, championship kind of stuff. They just do. So that part will be tantalizing to keep them together. So if it's a close call, actually, you might be unhappy because you don't get to see them in Pittsburgh, but there is a method to the madness. Let's get to Tristan Broz, a guy who has had a lot put on his plate this season. I'm talking old country buffet, loaded up for grandma kind of plate. As they've continued his growth at center. Bear in mind, for much of his college career, he was a winger. And a third, fourth line winger at that. I mean, he was on his way out of the lineup at Denver until some injuries kind of catapulted him up to the top of the lineup and then ultimately in the middle of the top line. And his career, his output, his play just went through the roof. And everyone's like, oh, so he's a center. Okay, I gotcha. Obviously, Broz helped lead Denver to a national championship. And he was really good in that process from like January through what is the Frozen Four? In March, late March, when that sort of wraps up. He is now playing center professionally. He had to work on face-offs, and that's actually been the easiest thing. I mean, I have the conversation recorded. I guess I could play the conversation with Tristan Broz, but I think I can summarize it a little faster. He's getting really good on face-offs. He's become one of the go-to guys, if not the go-to guy, for a defensive zone draw in the final couple minutes for Coach Kirk McDonald. That's saying quite a bit. McDonald was telling me about the game last weekend, I guess, 10 days ago now. And he throws, they call him Brozer. He throws Brozer out for a couple of defensive zone draws, and he wins all three, like snaps them back to the defenseman. Just clean face-off wins, snap straight back. And that really impressed the coaches. And that's, quite a bit of how far Broz has come. His skating is slick. I won't say he's a speedster, but he's zippy. I think that's fair. If you know kind of what I mean, he's agile. He gets, not only north and south with some pace, but he can get side to side, change direction, and he can keep up with the play that way, which I think is really crucial. A lot of guys, wow, they can really skate fast. Just don't ask them to turn. Broz has a good crossover step that generates some speed and allows him to get around the ice. He's also got a pretty good wrist shot. Snapped a power play goal on Friday night. Got the puck in the left circle. Had a clean look at the goalie and snapped it top corner. I mean, it was kind of obvious he was going to score because it was just so quick. He didn't dust the puck and he didn't look, didn't study the goalie. He knew exactly what he needed to do and did it in a millisecond. Showed some scorer's hands. And he's done that intermittently in his Penguins organization career. Did it a lot in college the last several months and did it in the Beauty League with a couple of filthy goals too. From what I gather in talking to people, there are still a couple of details he needs to get more consistent on in the 200-foot game. But again, he's coming along. Will he become a middle six center? I suppose he'll answer that question when he gets to Pittsburgh. I wish I could tell you definitively, yes, he's absolutely going to be a second-line center. That might be stretching it. He's going to have a chance. Third-line center seems pretty appropriate. He could also very easily become a second-line winger, which, if he gets to the NHL level and whatever the situation dictates, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, and they might just throw him back on the wing, and there you go. Let's talk about Owen Pickering now. Because you know what? Let me insert one other prospect here. Because some of you have asked me about Philip Larson, the goaltender. I wrote a little bit about him in the Penguins notebook on Tuesday. Around 11:30 a.m. I published it. The Penguins obviously have a logjam in net. Tristan Jarry kind of is creating sort of a traffic jam at the AHL level. So at the NHL level, you're going to have Blomqvist and Nedeljkovic. That, I think, is pretty well set for the rest of the year, almost guaranteed, barring injury. Which means at the AHL level, you've got Jarry, Philip Larson, which is a pretty good tandem to have. But then you've got Sergei Murashov, who should be in the AHL. In 6 games this season, at the American level, Murashov's save percentage, .934. Not a typo. I didn't misspeak. .934. He's been spectacular in a few games. Stole a game, shut out. I think that was against Hartford that he stood on his head. So what do you do in that situation? You can't send Tristan Jarry home. That's an NHL Players Association complaint waiting to happen. That's also just a bad look, sending a guy home who has 3 years left on his contract because you've got a prospect you want to play. I know that's easy in the PlayStation world. It's easy in like the fantasy hockey world. It's not so easy in real life. The wheels, the fallout, the consequences go far beyond anything that you or I have thought about. Which brings us to Larson. I am very not bullish on him getting to the NHL. He's only 6'2", but he plays kind of a big style. So a lot of pucks hit him. That's the good part. Pucks are hitting him, not going past him. He's had a really good year in Wilkes-Barre. I mean, his statistics kind of jump off the page at you. I mean, he's got a .925 save percentage in Wilkes-Barre. His record is 7-4-2. What I'm seeing, however, he's not a clean goaltender. And what I mean by that is a lot of pucks hit him. And then it becomes kind of like scatter shot. He's not absorbing shots and preventing rebounds. He's pucks are hitting him and bouncing here, bouncing there. So he's making more saves than he needs to because he's making these second chance saves. He's also got a pretty good defense around him that, quite frankly, they jump on loose pucks very quickly, and they take care of their goalies in Wilkes-Barre. I wonder, because Larson is 25, because he came over with the expectation of kind of being on an NHL path. I mean, bear in mind that the Penguins didn't expect Murashov to get shuffled out of Russia and kind of come over surprisingly in July, late July. They had signed Larson back in April, probably thinking Murashov had 1 or 2 more years in Russia. And that Larson would have a chance, a year or 2 to ascend or not, really. He'd have plenty of ice or plenty of net to get his shot. Unfortunately for him, he's probably, of the 6 goalies, Nedeljkovic, Blomqvist, Jari, Murashov, Larson, Taylor Gauthier, Larson's probably the 5th best. But can you send a guy in that situation in his career down to Wheeling? You'd like to keep him around because he stops a lot of pucks. And maybe you can, I'm sure the Penguins are thinking they can fix a few things. Maybe, just maybe, that 925 AHL save percentage becomes a 915 NHL save percentage. Larson is a late bloomer. Because he's 25, he's been on a crazy road. He was a 6th-round draft pick of Detroit back in 2016. So he spends a year in the Swedish junior program, then the USHL, then 1 year at the University of Denver, turns pro, gets 7 games at the AHL level, and then 10 games at the ECHL level in Toledo. And at that point, he's like, thank you very much. I'll see you later. Heads to Sweden, never to be seen again. He's playing in the Swedish minor leagues for a couple of seasons after that. So that brings us to like 2023. He gets a shot with Leksand in the Swedish Elite League, and he takes advantage of it. I think he had something like a 920 save percentage. And everyone's like, oh. He gets the North American call once again from the Penguins. But boy, the problem is Murashov is special. I don't know if Murashov is going to be as good in the NHL. You're never quite sure, right? Could be the next UC Soros. He could be the next Tristan Jari, or just somebody who didn't click. Thinking of so many goaltenders who, Alex Lyon bounced around how long before he kind of figured it out, and Kevin Lankinen, and I'm thinking the other guy, Michael Hutchinson, who was everybody's 3rd goalie and always seemed to wind up playing in the biggest games with every team because the guys in front of him would get injured, be it outdoor games, winter classics, playoff games. You're never sure if you've got a star or a journeyman. But Murashov sure looks like a star. And I hate to downgrade Philip Larson, but until he learns to absorb some shots, the NHL would eat him alive. They really would. You give those pucks on the doorstep in the NHL, 5 a night are going past you. Now let's get to Owen Pickering, the bubbly rookie defenseman who acquitted himself quite well with thine Pittsburgh Penguins before being sent down. In fairness, he was trending a little bit downward. It was kind of obvious he'd made some mistakes. He was trying to spread his wings maybe in the wrong spots, and whether his confidence took a hit or it was just part of the process, they're like, okay, just time out, calm down, go back to Wilkes-Barre, work on a few things, which he clearly is. Pickering is just he's on autopilot with Wilkes-Barre. He's doing everything he needs to do. Clean, crisp, quiet, boom, boom, boom. No fuss, no muss, which is a pretty good thing to have. Steady and quiet. He chips in offensively. He jumps into the play at some of the, a couple of those moments, almost like a Marcus Pettersson. When he does it, it's at the right time, and everyone's surprised, and so you have maximum effectiveness. There is something I want to talk about, and I have to really choose my words carefully. I talked with Dave Molinari before I printed a little excerpt or, a slice of what I was thinking on Sunday. Because I saw some things when he was in Pittsburgh, locker room, on the ice, that made me kind of tilt my head a little bit, like, huh. And then I heard a few things in Wilkes-Barre, like some guys were a bit rough on Pickering at the NHL level. They gave him the rookie treatment, which I was a bit surprised, if not disappointed by. I could see giving a problem child a little bit of a hard time, right? The nail that sticks up is the nail that gets pounded down. Pickering is not the nail that sticks up. So, unnamed players were kind of giving him a little bit of a rough time. I noticed a little bit of a change in Pickering in the Penguins locker room. From one day to the next, smiling and happy and, he had to do way too much media. Like every day the team media was like, hey, you're going to do this now. You're going to talk about this now, because he was so much fun. And on the days that the Penguins team media didn't kind of take his time, the two of us who are on the road every game, Taylor or I would be over there chatting with him. It kind of became a thing where I used to go chat with him quite a bit, and then I could never get near the guy. It was like, the Godfather wedding receiving line to talk to Owen Pickering. I suspect that was an impetus to be a little rough on the guy. Hey, stop talking to the media so much. Stop, don't be friendly. Bear in mind, someone pulled Marcus Pettersson aside last year and said, don't be so friendly with the media. So that's a thing. Don't be friendly with the media. God forbid, you educate people. It really upset me last year, and I kind of hold a grudge to that player who's no longer with the Penguins. I will admit that much. Kind of hold a grudge, to be honest, because I felt like then I was causing Marcus Pettersson grief by asking him the questions that he so thoughtfully answered. And then I was able to pass that information along to you, either in the form of analysis or direct quote. You were smarter for it. I was smarter for it. Not everybody was happy. That didn't make me I felt bad, but I also kind of 30 years ago, I could have said something to the other player. Back in the day when media was on equal footing and the newspapers had real power, I could have said something. Nah, you don't do that stuff anymore. There used to be a bucket of beer in the middle of the locker room before they put the stupid logo on the carpet that you can't walk on. Used to be a bucket of beer, and everybody would partake after the game. You'd have conversations. Players would hang out and be talking in the locker room. There wasn't like a players-only lounge. I've gone pretty far afield of Owen Pickering now, haven't I? But I hope you appreciate the color and the context of everything that I'm bringing to this. So fast forwarding, Pickering, Owen is a little more reserved. He's still got the quick wit and the quick smile, but he's pulled back He's dialed it down a little bit, which is unfortunate. And to be honest, I don't know that I want to know who gave him a hard time. I don't think I want to, because then what do I do with that information? Do I sit on it and just kind of keep that from you? I don't think you would be very happy if you knew that I knew. Especially if you knew that I knew that you knew that I knew. You know? Okay, enough of that. Pickering will be in a Penguins uniform before the end of the season, I think. But here's something I nudged Shelly Anderson in this direction because the new guy they got on waivers from Utah, and good Lord, please don't ask me to spell his or pronounce his name. The Russian defenseman they picked up on waivers. So the Penguins are going to have 5 lefty defensemen. Matt Grzelcyk, Ryan Graves, P.O. Joseph, Ryan Shea. I'm sorry, 6 left-handed defensemen. Vinny Desharnais. And, all right, here I go. Are you ready? Vladislav Kolyachonok. Either way. So the Penguins are going to have 6 lefties. From that standpoint, I don't, you're not going to bring up Owen Pickering unless you trade a couple. Unless you're prepared to sit Ryan Graves for the rest of the season and basically go with a Joseph Pickering Desharnais left side, or Joseph Pickering Kolyachonok, or Ryan Graves, or not Ryan Graves, Ryan Shea is certainly lost in the shuffle here, which is unfortunate. I thought he played well enough on the left side. He was sketch on the right side. He's a good enough guy. I never wanted to ask, like, hey, man, that's pretty rough. Would you rather be on the left side? Like, what purpose does that question serve when I can tell you the difference? How much better he played on the left side, smooth and steady and confident, a solid 6'7" defenseman. So if he doesn't get that opportunity with the Penguins, I would hope that next year he signs somewhere else and gets that opportunity to play 30 and 40 or 50 NHL games. I digress. So maybe as I say it all out loud, perhaps Pickering won't be back with the Penguins this season, unless they do trade a couple of guys. Okay, let's talk about Sidney Crosby. I've only wasted about 40 minutes, 43 minutes to be exact. Sidney Crosby at 43:30, go. All right. It is rather obvious that collision with Eric Haula and I think, was it Quinn Hughes against the New Jersey Devils before the break, a few games before the break, clearly injured Sidney Crosby's arm. He said it was just tweaked. He's clearly playing one-handed in this Four Nations face-off tournament. And he's still leading the tournament in scoring. How ridiculous is that? Sidney Crosby leading the tournament in scoring, playing one-armed against the best in the world. Only Sidney Crosby. He basically wins or he protects the win on Monday, makes a big hit on Mikael Granlund, dislodges the puck from Granlund, who had just scored a couple of quick goals to pull Finland within 1 in the final couple of minutes. So Crosby makes a big open ice hit, creates the loose puck. I think McKinnon kind of chips it his way. Crosby catches it, throws it down, smacks it the better part of 100 feet, kind of fluttering. Crosby couldn't shoot very well into an empty net. Perfect Sidney Crosby goal. Ta-da. So here's the funny thing, and I think John Cooper, I couldn't tell quite what Cooper meant on Monday. And that great quote you saw on the website, Sidney Crosby in our country walks on water. Talked about how great Crosby has been imparting knowledge and wisdom and leadership, even to the best in the world, to the first timers, to the veterans. Crosby is the man. And Cooper had a line in there in his paragraph answer on Crosby when he said, and I think a lot more will come out after the tournament. I was like, are you talking about compliments, or are you talking about just how much Sidney Crosby is going through in order to play in this tournament? The way it sounded, the way it read, it was completely open to interpretation, and I erred on the side of caution and just kind of printed it as if it meant more compliments. I can tell you now on the podcast that I was like, oh, wait. I kind of studied it and I watched it a few times. I don't know what comes next. I mean, look, in almost every media availability, Sidney Crosby has had his hands, his wrists tucked into his hoodie so that you can't see how heavily taped his wrist is. Did I let that out of the bag? I think there is like one picture of it where he's heavily taped. He's got, the wrist is heavily taped. So I'm not breaking any news there. There is one picture. And I remember back in 2002, because as Tristan Broz tried to compliment me in Wilkes-Barre, that's so cool. You've been around hockey so long. I was like, I'm old, because I was telling him some, stories of Crosby as a rookie and such. In 2002, Mario Lemieux was not healthy enough to play in the NHL. But he got to go to the Olympics. He kind of gutted it out to get the gold medal. And I remember very vividly, and this is before social media, for those of you youngins who can't imagine an analog world, we were still transitioning from analog to digital back in 2002. People actually talked to each other, with their voices. And they called talk shows on television and radio, and they wrote letters. They actually put this instrument called a pen in their hand with a piece of actual paper made from destroyed trees of the rainforest or forest around the world, and put on these little metal binder things, and you wrote words, sometimes like in flowing, what they call cursive. And you wrote these things and you sent it off with a stamp and an envelope to the newspaper, who would get it in like 3 days and maybe read it in another 3 days to voice your displeasure. The world moved a little slower in 2002. If you really wanted to vent your anger immediately, you could go to a message board. Thinking back to some of the message boards. I digress. Mario Lemieux played in the Olympics, just, kind of a shell of himself. In fact, he missed an empty netter that would have sealed a gold medal. Canada won the gold medal anyway. Or was that 2004? Do I have my years wrong? Let me very quickly do a little fact check on myself, because I remember the story vividly. Sometimes time doesn't always jibe. Let's see. 2002. I was, in fact, correct. That was the Penguins team was going nowhere. So he made the decision to, put off treatment that would have basically ended his NHL season until after the Olympics. And Mario was generally Teflon, immune to criticism for good reason. But he was not somebody who had detractors. Nobody was looking to criticize Mario Lemieux, especially at that time, because he's fighting for a new arena. He rescued the team. It's in Pittsburgh. I mean, the guy has done enough for you, right? But not everybody had come to grips with the fact that the Penguins roster was mediocre. They couldn't afford a real roster. Jágr had been traded. They the three guys they got were not NHL players. And, they were holding on with Marty Straka, Robert Lang, and Alexei Kovalev. And Mario was playing with guys like Alexei Morozov, Konstantin Koltsov, and I could go down the list. It surely wasn't much fun for Mario. So it surely wasn't much fun for Mario. And he goes to the Olympics, he wins the gold medal, and then he has his treatment. He's basically done for the year. Penguins fans kind of turned on Mario. There were enough people who went to the trouble to voice their displeasure. Well, if he's good enough to play in the Olympics for a gold medal, he can get the Penguins to the playoffs, or he can chase a Stanley Cup. He chose a gold medal over the Stanley Cup, and sort of down the line. Oh, he betrayed his team to play in the Olympics. I mean, there was some of that. That was probably the only time I can recall in Mario Lemieux's career in which Penguins fans sort of gave him some guff. I wonder if Sidney Crosby has to receive serious treatment or miss a couple of weeks after this Four Nations, or a few weeks. I wonder how Penguins fans will respond. Actually, I think a lot of you might be very happy because it generally would mean the Penguins are going to tank. It generally means they're going to fall like a rock in the standings without Sidney Crosby. And I think losses kind of make a lot of you happy as that first round draft pick gets better and better and better and better. By the way, I go back and forth. Does a draft pick get higher or lower? If you go from like 10th overall to 5th overall, most people would say you get a higher draft pick, not a lower draft pick. But the reality, it should be flipped, right? You should get a higher pick when you go back into the 20s and a lower pick when you go from 10 to 5. I think a lot of Penguins fans would be happy if the Penguins didn't do well over the final 25 games. But I'm curious to many of your reactions to Sidney Crosby. If he's, if he's genuinely injured, whether it's surgery or just wrapped up for a couple of weeks and he really can't play in the NHL, well, he could play in Four Nations. You know what? He can't play for the Penguins. I tend to err on the side of he knows his team's not going to win a Stanley Cup this year. He knows his team isn't trying for a Stanley Cup. And this was his playoffs, and this was his Stanley Cup. Canada's going to beat the U.S. Thursday night. The hockey gods have ordained it. USA is so battered. I mean, the Kachucks might play Thursday, one or both, but they're so beat up. Team USA. The Kachucks are dinged up. You've got Charlie McAvoy spending the night in the hospital. He's out for the tournament. You've got Jake Sanderson now being thrust into a prime time role because unless one of the other defensemen gets sick, Quinn Hughes cannot play in the Four Nations final. So I suppose I'll leave it to you to comment and to debate how you will react if Crosby, and I put a giant if Sidney Crosby has to miss time after the Four Nations, or if he comes back and plays a few games and says, I just can't do it, this isn't getting better, and then misses significant time. It would be interesting. You know how social media works. Somebody has to get noticed. Somebody has to deliver the hot take. Somebody has to say it like it is and just dump all over somebody. It's been a long time since that dump truck was headed Sidney Crosby's way. And I would hope it doesn't find him. I would hope that fans and media understand the situation. I would hope. I am not optimistic. All right, let's talk about the final thing we're going to do here. The silly trade talk of Sidney Crosby came from none other than Derek Brassard and Georges Laraque on Montreal radio. I would love to play you the clip. It's a couple minutes long, but they're speaking French. So I had to rely on a couple of the Canadians' websites to translate it and kind of pull out the good quotes. I wish I had more to give you. I wish I had the full context and paragraphs of what they're talking about. I was instead kind of forced to go with the scraps of what was, the excerpts that were printed. So what Brassard was saying, like, hey, this is how you recruit. Montreal treated Sidney Crosby so well, that electric ovation. Crosby admitted he was a Montreal Canadiens fan growing up. It makes perfect sense. Why not? And Laraque has been kind of banging that drum very quietly since last December, saying, hey, Sid's a Montreal guy. It's kind of his adopted home team. Because, honestly, I just recently found out that the QMJHL is not Quebec Major Junior. It's actually Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League. Seriously, for 30 years, I've been saying, Quebec Major. It's Maritimes. Anyway. Laraque has been on that as well. And then, just to put the icing and the candles on this Sidney Crosby to Montreal cake, Marty Tremblay. I'm sorry, no, not Martin Tremblay. Scratch that. Erase it from your memory. Martin Lemay. I'm going to get it right eventually. I'm doing all this without notes. I'm going full John Roberts here. No notes. Lemay on RDS, again speaking French, said, if I were Kent Hughes, I would call Kyle Dubas, offer 2 first-round picks, and Cole Caulfield for Sidney Crosby. And Lemay did admit that probably wouldn't be enough. I will say this. It's at least a lot more plausible than the Crosby to Colorado nonsense. If Sidney Crosby were an ordinary human being, this would hold water. But Sidney Crosby is not ordinary. Crosby has stated he has tamped down everything in definitive, final language. He's not being traded. He's not asking for a trade. He's not going anywhere. He is here to help facilitate that transition to what comes next. I might say, why, Sid? Go have some fun. Go chase a Stanley Cup. Let the Penguins flounder and rebuild and get to where they're going. You don't need to be here for this. But he wants to be. He made that choice. He signed the contract knowing full well the train wreck that might lie ahead. There certainly is a mudslide on the tracks that's going to slow the train down, if not stop it for a minute. Maybe Dubas can pull a couple of rabbits out of the hat. Maybe in free agency with a ton of money to spend, with a couple extra draft picks, he can flip them for young players and feel like it's time to begin the upswing far faster than most teams have ever done. It's possible. He's setting himself up for that opportunity, but he'd have to be pretty darn perfect. Every decision's going to have to hit in order for that to happen within the next couple of years. Now, we know Sidney Crosby, not even to Montreal, is going to accept the trade. But I found it funny that even players who know him are still like, hey, this could happen. It's not going to happen. No, not. All right. That is 1 hour of No Pucks Given. Hopefully, I have filled your ride to work, and maybe you've got me on the iPod walking to the office. Give the boss the finger for me. I appreciate you all very much. And hey, by the way, if you own a business or you work for a business and you have your hands on some advertising dollars, the No Pucks Given podcast, when we do them, generally does about 1,500 to 2,000 listeners through all of the downloads and all of that. If I had a little more time, I'm sure I could inflate those numbers. But that's what we do about, a week. We do about 1,500 to 2,000. If you'd like to sponsor No Pucks Given and the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platform, why do drop me a DM, an email or such, and I will happily hear you out and make it worth your while. Well, if for a local company, we would bend over backwards to make it happen. So that is it for No Pucks Given. I'm still interviewing co-hosts, so you had to listen to me yap for an hour. I appreciate y'all. Have fun.